Good evening, and welcome to you all. My name is Paula Larrain, and I have the pleasure to moderate this event, which is generally going to be a conversation between yourselves and your distinguished guest, which I will introduce in just a minute. So here are just some practical notes how we're going to do this. Our guest will hold a speech, which will be around 30 minutes, 40 minutes, depending on how much he elaborates on it. And then I will ask a few follow-up questions that you'll probably also have on your minds. And then around 8 o'clock, we're going to have a break of around 30 minutes, so you can all think about the questions to come, because we're going to have almost a whole hour for a Q&A session afterwards. So please write down your questions, and when you ask questions, please let them be questions and not like long lectures of 3, 4, 5 minutes. It'll be best for everybody. Okay? But first of all, I have the pleasure, of course, to introduce to you the special rapporteur to the UN for the occupied territories in Palestine. Please help me give a very warm welcome to Francesca Albanese.
This is just, can you hear me now? This is just because she told you to show what warm welcome means for the Danes. Thank you so much. That's lovely. And good evening, everyone. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here with you today. And let me do that today, because I forgot to do that yesterday and I felt so bad. I need to thank all the people who have worked so hard for months to bring me here. And these are Jews for Just Peace. Isn't it interesting that every time I travel to a country, there is always a Jewish organization first in line to have me here? This is just to speak to how anti-Semitic I am. However, Danish Islamic Center, yeah, the Muslims are also there, of course, and the Palestinian Culture Institute of Denmark, Palestine Solidarity Action of Horus, and the Nassim Network. And I also want to thank particularly this gentleman, Jonathan Ophir. Not only because without him, I can tell you, the discussion of having me in Denmark would have not even started, but he's really gone out of his way to make this visit packed, very packed, and meaningful. So thank you, Jonathan. So, and of course, my splendid, like my husband calls them, childminders, my support team, Amal and Teresa. Thank you. And I also thank each of you for taking the time to participate in today's event, and Maria for being again with us tonight. Paula, for being again with us tonight. So let me start straight from where it matters. The catastrophe that the Palestinian people are going through, and because I think it's really quite unprecedented, and in a way, it speaks to the dangerous state that the world is in today, and we should all be concerned. But we will talk about that. So not only the situation for the Palestinians, and I think those of you who have been following that over the past 50 months don't need to be reminded over and over of the horrible statistics that have marked this genocide. But the situation is also very cruel. Now, following the suspension of hostilities, I don't know how to call it, because in fact, since the beginning of ceasefire, Israel has killed nearly 100 Palestinians in Gaza. So it's not really suspension of hostilities. But however, since the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas on the 19th of January, the Palestinians who survived the 15 months of brutal assault were finally allowed to breathe, to look around and look for other survivors, to take a breath, to return to their homes, whatever remained of their homes, and cities that frankly no longer exist, to look for their loved ones, alive or dead, especially those who were buried alive under the rubble or incinerated, and to give dignified burials to them and the many others whose bodies were left to rot in the street amid the rubble, unexploded ordnance, and waste. You know, the cruelty is that despite the ceasefire agreement, the ceasefire agreement, between 47,000, these are the figures that we have already confirmed of people who have been killed in Gaza, by Israeli tanks, bombs, and snipers. Others say that it's nearly 70,000, including the Lancet, which is the most authoritative medical journal. Yes. Oh, sorry. You see? Where would we be without Jonathan? Sorry. Feel free to tell me, hello, we can't hear you. And so the cruelty is that despite all this, thousands of people have been killed, including 17,000 children. You know, during the genocide, as I was preparing to go to New York to present at the General Assembly, I was saying, how come that people don't understand? You say 17,000 children have been killed and they keep the straight face. And my friend told me, try to tell them 17,000 dogs, because the Americans would react more. I mean, human beings, people in the West react more easily if you mention victims with which they empathize. And it's painful to say, but it's painful to realize that this is the reality. And still, we have no true sense of how many more, in fact, have been killed due to their inability to access the most basic instances and needs of life: food, hygiene, medical treatment. Recently, 583 Palestinians, most of whom were held without charge in Israeli jails that an Israeli NGO, B'Tselem, have called torture centers, were released as part of the ceasefire agreement. Now, humanitarian aid trucks are finally entering Gaza, largely unhindered, so without the chaos that was reigning when Israel was controlling the entering of aid. And so 730 trucks a day are entering. They have been delivered to the starving people of Gaza. And yet, I mean, this is great, but it's impossible to fathom the needs of a population which is trapped in a destruction camp. In Gaza, everything has been destroyed. So they need to resume slowly life amid the dust of devastation. And it's also, I mean, cruelty is also that 2 days after this is the ceasefire, Israel has intensified, and mark my words, is not as started, it has intensified its military offensive against the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank under the evocative name of Operation Iron Wall. And that signifies a Gaza-like indiscriminate attacks, especially in Jenin and neighboring cities like Tubas, Nablus, Tulkarem in the north, the destruction of entire residential blocks, the erasure of refugee camps where Palestinians are from 1947-49, when Israel took most of their lands and possessions. And there is the forced displacement of thousands of Palestinians from the West Bank as we speak, and just killing of anyone who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Since October 2023, and this is why I said escalated, intensified the violence, but already before the ceasefire, 830 or 840 Palestinians have been killed. Now 870 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank alone since October 7, 2023, in the West Bank. So this is why I say it's an assault against the whole of the Palestinian people, not just the Palestinians in Gaza, and certainly not just Hamas. And so when I said 44 of them have been killed since the ceasefire, the rest before. And bear in mind, thousands, like 9,400, 10,000 have been detained, most of them without charge, without trial, not from Gaza. No, this adds to the thousands who have been detained, most of them tortured, some of them raped, some of them tortured to death. This has also happened to the Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. What is laid before our eyes would have not happened but for the conditions created by Israel's sustained denial of the right of self-determination of an entire people for 76 years. And I find that we Europeans in general struggle to understand what the right of self-determination is. Because we have it, most of us. But those who have not experienced what the denial of self-determination is do not intuitively comprehend how the denial of self-determination, which, let's be very simple, when you read it on books, university books, it's very hard to comprehend what the right self-determination is. It's such an intellectual architecture of hard to comprehend concept. But in fact, the right of self-determination is the right of a people to exist as a people. That's it. And to determine themselves in a given territory, to decide for themselves politically, meaning whom they want to be governed by, economically, how they want to use the resources of the land for their development, as a collective identity, religiously, and so on. And we don't understand, without understanding this, we cannot understand how the denial of self-determination might impact life, every facet of life. And so the discussion concerning human rights, Western countries, this before October 7. Now, at least they have the decency to shut up about how to help the Palestinians' human rights situation. I mean, it was focused on, let's help women's rights. Let's help the Palestinians learn how to make cheese. Let's reform the Palestinian Authority. Let's teach the Palestinian kids how to draw. This is development cooperation, if you want my 2 cents. But again, the discussion without focusing on the fundamental rights of a people to exist as a people becomes sterile, becomes superficial, becomes a mere exercise in intellectual rhetoric. But denying a people its right to exist as a people has such a corrosive effect on both individual and collective identity as the fate of millions of indigenous people worldwide, from North America to South America to Australia and Africa, demonstrate. And there is a reason this right, especially after the decolonization, especially after many people from the global South broke the chains of domination that we Europeans maintained on them, now this right is upheld by international law among the most important legal principles and rights enshrined therein. In fact, the right of self-determination is the common right among the 2 basic human rights, the 2 fundamental human rights treaties, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights and the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Everyone agreed that without self-determination, all other rights cannot be realized. And it is our Orientalism, which is an elegant word if you have not heard of it before, but it's an elegant word to refer to racial biases that Western people tend to have, in the words of the great Palestinian intellectual Edward Said. Well, it is Orientalism. It's our Orientalism. And I can tell you from some of the meetings I've had here in Denmark, there is some Orientalists around. Well, it's this Orientalism, and I can give you the names afterward, but not on camera. Well, it is Orientalism that prevents many in the West from truly understanding it. We need to recognize it in order to face it and fix it. As we do not understand self-determination and how critical, central this is to the Palestinian question, cannot fully comprehend what is going on is genocide. So let's start from that. Let me really go to the basic and center how Palestinian rights have been raped. And this is to be in our mind, because this is what I try to do as a special rapporteur. I knew since the beginning that my work wouldn't be effective if my reports were only about the cycle of violence. During these semesters, Israel has violated the rights of the farmers, the rights of the fishermen, it has taken that much land. Of course, I had to explain why Israel is doing that. Because Israel wants the land. Israel wants the land that remains to the Palestinians. That very little that remains of historical Palestine, Israel wants that as well. And it's not just that Israel wants that land for exclusive exercise of Jewish Israeli self-determination, which means getting rid of the Palestinians, because the Palestinians, by their very existence, represent a threat to this design. Because the Palestinians, not only being not Jewish, have no right to stay there and to be part of that design, which was a folly 80 years ago already. But okay, history was such that prompted that design to become a political project and a state. But imagining a state for one group only, an ethno-national state, being Muslim or being Christian, this is not something that is conducive to peaceful coexistence. However, nowadays, in 2024, including on the land that international consensus recognized being the land where the Palestinians can exercise self-determination as the exclusive right to have a state, which doesn't mean that Jewish people cannot live there. They can, perhaps by renting instead of stealing. And there are so many Israelis, not so many, but there are Israelis, part of the Israelis against apartheid, who live among the Palestinians, who live with the Palestinians, because for them it's easier psychologically live with the Palestinians than in a racist society. And these people should not be invisibilized. And this is the thing, live and rent. Live with them and rent, but they should live as Palestinians and not as Israeli settlers. I lost it. Bear with me 1 second. Oh God. Yes, so I was saying, the reality is such, we need to understand that because Israel wants the land, the plan has been, the activation of the plan has been ongoing. And October 7, with the brutality that it carried, because it was brutal, there is no question about that. There is no question that crimes against Israeli civilians were committed. And these are crimes and have to be accounted for. However, no crimes justifies other crimes, ever. So explain it to your politicians. But who seem to be very convinced that the Palestinians have, some of them, the Palestinians have brought this upon themselves. You know, the Gaza population, half of whom is made of children. And they say, they voted for Hamas. How, please tell us, explain to us how all Palestinians are not Hamas. I mean, are we really at this level of conversation in a civilized country? Can't people just read a book instead of making assumptions? Read a book. There are so many wonderful scholars, not even Palestinians. I understand you don't want to read Palestinian books. Fine. There are French, British, white people like you who have written about Hamas. Take the time to read a book about Hamas and learn what it is. Because then, if you're ignorant, when I sit with you in a meeting, I have to explain to you what Hamas is, and then this gives you the authority as an Orientalist to point the fingers at me, you are defending Hamas. No, I'm not, I'm just educating you. And this shouldn't be my job. I'm doing you a favor, and it's not even appreciated, But again, it's about putting things in context. So back to square zero. What does genocide have to do with the denial of the right of the Palestinian people to exist? And you will get it in a minute. So 1 year ago, in March 2024, in a report titled Anatomy of a Genocide, I concluded that there were reasonable grounds to believe that Israel had committed at least 3 acts of genocide. Killing members, first of all, just to be on the same page, genocide is a very heinous, awful, insidious crime. It's the destruction of a group in whole or in part, as such. And the group can be national, ethnic, religious, or racial. And what is characteristic of genocide is that it's made of other crimes. For example, act of killing members of the group, which I found being committed, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, which I found being committed, and deliberately inflicting upon the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. If you destroy all hospitals, chances are that those chronically ill, diabetes, leukemia, cancer, heart diseases will die without treatment. These are conditions calculated to bring about the destruction of you. But genocide is not, these are also war crimes, right? In a context of war, but hostilities. But, genocide is something more, is when these crimes are committed with intent, the mindset, the mens rea, as it's called in legal terminology, the intent to destroy a group. So you don't just kill, you kill to destroy the group. And people say, it's fantastic. I don't think that they understand what is genocide, but everyone knows that it's very difficult to prove intent. Yes, when it's hidden. Because normally, decent human beings have first of all, they try not to commit genocide, and also, if they do, they try to hide it. They don't go in plain sight saying, they're all animals, kill them all, or cut electricity, food, water, fuel, nothing else. Or they say to the soldiers. They don't go to the soldiers and say, destroy the Amalek, the mother, the suckling, the donkey, the camel. Because if they do, this is genocidal statements, It doesn't take a Nobel Prize, a Nobel laureate to understand what this language leads to. Decent people don't say these things. If they do, they commit genocidal incitement. And then you know what? Then when these words are acted upon, when you have soldiers, hundreds of soldiers, destroying mosques, entire villages, residential homes, bombing schools, United Nations building, and say, we came here to destroy, displace, and settle, end of quote. And they wrote Amalek on all houses. You understand that this language has been absorbed by soldiers who have become willful executioners. So yes, it's true that it's difficult to prove genocidal intent when it's not that smashed on your face. The problem is, how do you deny there is genocidal intent when it's so exposed? Over 1.5 years, it has been said. And the critical thing, two things. The first is that when I wrote my first report, and trust me, I mean, that has been, I don't say that to elicit your sympathy, but when I look back at those, at the videos of those days when I presented the report, and it was the first time I had shaken hands. Even people who are sitting on the podium next to me were saying, "Shit, Parkinson." I mean, in the sense, I really had a strong emotional, I was in a strong emotional state. It was painful to write that report. And I look back, I said, I really looked distressed because it was the most painful thing I've ever done. And then you get used. Something inside you dies with the pain and you carry on. But the thing is that it was fundamental to say, open your eyes, because not only Israel has not denied it has committed those acts, it has just lied about it. It has said, we have given evacuation orders. We have created the safe zones. And it's Hamas who hides behind hundreds of human shields. And sorry, it's collateral damages. Look at how many, they even calculated, I don't know where they find the creativity to do that, but they calculated how many people had died in other conflicts and say, the percentage of the population in Gaza who's alive is still significant. And I say, you know, and it's still genocide. You can commit genocide without killing even one person. And in fact, if you read the Genocide Convention, Article 2, killing is just one of the 5 acts. Because in fact, if you look at, this is why I say, open your eyes, learn from history, learn from other genocide, because surely this is not the first genocide in human history. I just hope it's the last one. And it might be the last one if we take the time to understand what a genocide is. Because if you look at Australia and Canada, genocide was not done mainly through killing, was done through segregation of people, through cutting resources, by stealing the children from their parents. Those who survived with their families are called the hidden, in Canada, are called the hidden children. People hid their children underground, so not to have them stolen. And this was a way to preserve their indigeneity, their blood, but also their culture. And this is why I say, I exposed in March last year the humanitarian camouflage. I said, Israel is lying, but much more than before, because Israel has always justified, the violation of international law by using international law categories. It didn't say, it's not occupied territory, it's disputed. And the human shields has been used over and over in 2008, 2012, 2014, and 2021, and 2022. So I was not surprised to see the use of the human shields argument on steroids. What I was surprised is the silence of our political leaders. No, it's worse than that. It's not just that. It's the fact that everyone ran to Israel to promise allegiance. And this emboldened what was already ingrained in the political DNA of Israel, the sense of impunity, of hubris, that they can crush international law through and through and there will never be consequences. And now let's deal with the bitter fruit of it. A country, I was saying 2 months ago, suspend Israel's voting rights from the UN. This is what it deserves. And it's not because I have something against Israel. As a country, I have something against apartheid. And still, since Israel practices apartheid against the Palestinians, it is to face the consequences, like South Africa, apartheid South Africa before it. And then also the other apartheid regimes that still exist. No, we cannot do that. We cannot risk this. And now Israel is stepping out of the UN with its own feet. At least it has done it from the Human Rights Council. So you see the hubris. But however, we'll get to the bright side of this horrible moment in a minute. Let me go to the last report that I wrote. And it's, something has changed, because when I presented the first report and I said, look, Israel is also practicing humanitarian camouflage. It's distorting the categories of distinction. You know, in war, you cannot target civilians. You can only target combatants. And Israel has blurred the the confines of who's targetable. Everyone is Hamas. And by saying everyone is Hamas, poof, everyone becomes killable, destroyable, and or choppable into pieces. And then the proportionality, the military necessity. They were going around with this AI-produced video saying there is the headquarters of Hamas under Al-Shifa. They bomb Al-Shifa, they don't find anything, and still they continue to use this argument to bring down the other hospitals. No one intervenes. Everything is fine. This is why I said, mind you, Israel is normalizing the destruction of international humanitarian law. We go, in front of us, there is a world of conflicts without civilians. Prophetic words again. 6 months later, Israel was bombing Lebanon. Poor them. Again, when I think of the Lebanese people, the shock that has fallen upon them from night to day, and entire buildings, entire residential areas, mosques, churches, like Gaza, had been destroyed, saying, and Netanyahu went on video saying, well, in your garage and under your sofas, there are the missiles of Hezbollah. So he knew what these people had under their beds. And no one has said a thing. They carried out one of the most hallucinating terrorist attacks I've seen, with the explosion of the pager. Have you seen condemnation? No, at least in my countries, there were people saying, oh my God, that's so smart. But you see the racism. So we are still talking. Again, October 7 was criminal, was brutal, and I totally understand the rage of the Israelis. I totally get it. And this was a moment, as I said, on the 8th of October 2023, in the first interview that I gave, say, this is a moment to pause, to calm down, and to show wisdom and compassion. No one really trusted my words, but however, it would have been better instead of going to Israel and saying, yeah, we are with you, we are behind you. Voila, the result, 47,000 people killed. Later, maybe 60,000, maybe 70,000, doesn't matter. Yes, it matters, but at the same time, this is where we are. Israel has created a world without civilians, and it has also tested new weapons, cruel weapons, that, trust me, will not stay only in what Anthony Lowenstein called Palestine Laboratory. By the way, if there is one book that you read on Palestine, let be it. There are many books that are coming out now. They are fantastic, written by Palestinians, and they all deserve. But Palestine Laboratory deserves to be read because, I thought I knew a lot about Israel-Palestine. And three quarters of it was completely unknown to me. So please read this book because this is precious, and it shows not only why Israel uses Palestinians as guinea pigs for its military and security services, but also why the support of all member states, it's so difficult to bring down, because it's not just what is transferred to Israel, it's what is purchased. And this is how, again, Palestine is a laboratory, and Gaza has been a horror laboratory. And this is the mindset I had clear in mind when I wrote my second report on genocide. Genocide as colonial erasure. Not only I continue to document what had happened in the occupied in Gaza, I also looked at what had happened in the occupied Palestinian territory as a whole. So the killing, the arrest and detention, the destruction of the neighborhoods and the hospitals in particular, the torture, and arbitrary detention of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and said, hey, the genocide is leaking out of Gaza. And in order to understand the kind of how to spot the genocidal intent, we need to look at three things, the triple lens, what I call the triple lens, the totality of the conduct and crimes that Israel is committing against the totality of the Palestinians. It doesn't matter, totality of the Palestinians, doesn't matter if they are in West Bank or Gaza, they're Palestinians, so they are all a security threat to eliminate. and then in the totality of the land that Israel occupies militarily and has slated for expansion to realize Greater Israel. And you know, the responsibility of the state is evident. We don't need to wait for a criminal tribunal determining that its leaders or soldiers. It suffices one person exercising public functions to be found having committed genocide to incriminate the state as well. However, it would be paradoxical to believe that we need to wait for a fair trial with all the guarantees and length that it implies to end in order to determine if it's genocide, because we have an obligation, states have an obligation to prevent genocide. So when there is a risk, they need to intervene. And let me go to, and this is something they have not done. And this is where I wanted to conclude. Denmark's responsibilities. Is it okay if I cover this point and then we close? Denmark's responsibilities. Denmark is one of those countries, again, from outside, it has this sterling reputation of the Scandinavian people have this. I don't know what you did to get it. Probably, yeah. No, probably it's the fact that you are not as bad as the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese and the Italians in terms of being, or in the Germans, how to forget the Germans, in terms of colonization and genocide. But yes, I mean, it's not as straightforward as the Danish government might see it. Because Denmark has obligations under international law, like any other member state, to comply with UN resolutions and its treaty obligations and ICJ advisory opinion. So the list is long, but let's look at the ICJ advisory opinion. By the way, I think that Denmark abstained on the UN resolution that decided on implementation of on the referral of the ICJ, of the question on self-determination to the ICJ. And also I think the last one on the deciding on the deadline for the occupation to end. So the ICJ, the highest court in the world, has found that Israel's occupation, as many people were saying, is illegal, is absolutely, totally, unconditionally illegal. And not because there is the violation of the law of wars, law of occupation here and there. No, it's by very essence illegal because it prevents the realization of the right of self-determination of the Palestinians, because it sucks the resources, it oppresses the people, it takes the land, because it imposes racial segregation and apartheid, and because it leads to the annexation of Palestinian territory. And what the court has said to Israel, you need to withdraw the troops, dismantle the settlements, and relinquish all forms of control. Meaning, even if Israel takes the troops and the settlers, all of them must still maintain, for example, control over the Gaza offshore and the reserves offshore, or the aqueducts in the water basins in the West Bank, it will still be legal. If Israel maintains, as it does, the exhaustion of its it has exhaustion pipes that take the pollution from Tel Aviv to the West Bank. This is illegal. So again, it's so historical, and people do not understand how dramatic, how the shift that this advisory opinion has brought upon. So what we need to understand is that the implications are for, and the court has said it, for member states, for the United Nations, and for businesses. So their obligations are not to recognize the illegal act, the consequences of the illegal act, not to aid and assist in any possible way the illegal act, and to work to bring to a cessation, and also to ensure reparations. So at least the government is obliged to offer its citizens transparency and clarity on all the relations that it maintains with Israel. not just with the settlements, with Israel, because it's the state of Israel which is responsible for the legality of the occupation. And diplomatic, economic, political, military, strategic, financial, all the military, all the relations that the Danes have, both the state and businesses. This should be exposed. Why? Because, you know, also charities, pension funds, banks, supply chains, anyone who participates in the illegal endeavor can be brought to account. They must cease their relations, they must rescind their contract, otherwise they should be brought to court. Remember, and then the last thing is, if on top of it, the other obligations is to investigate and prosecute anyone who commits crimes. This is even without taking into account the genocide, which has made all these more stringent, because the ICJ work on the genocide cases imposes the obligation not to transfer weapons directly or indirectly. You cannot lie. You cannot say, no, but I'm not transferring this, I'm transferring that. It's a part, it's not my fault. Come on, are we in secondary schools or what? This is a country which is committing genocide, which is committing war crimes. It's clear. Look at Gaza. Go to Gaza. Go use your diplomatic relations with Israel to convince to get you a tour around Gaza. Look at what a collection of war crimes look like. And then remember that you cannot transfer anything to this country and you cannot buy anything from this country. This is the other thing. So this is where Denmark is I don't think that is in compliance with its international obligation. And this is now upon you to make sure that your government and your businesses and your dual citizens, because there are Danish citizens who live in the colonies, who might have taken parts in the work of the army. So all these have to be brought to justice. Over to you. Thank you.
Accountability. Let me just mention the big orange elephant in the room, because we have a huge problem with the United States at the moment in terms of his plan, Trump's plan on Gaza. What are your comments on that? Because this is what everybody's thinking about at the moment, is that, yeah, we have a legal system, we have the intention of accountability somewhere in the world, but still, without the backing of the United States, it might be very difficult.
Look, you have to choose your allies. As I was saying before, we are seeing the bitter fruit of protracted impunity. We have accepted lawlessness to regulate life of the Palestinians. And lawlessness knows no borders, as you can see. It's interesting to see the Danes starting to freak out because of Greenland. You know, it's indeed, ask the Palestinian how it is to be, and they have endured a lot. I don't think that the US would have the capacity to transfer, I don't know, the equivalent of 800,000 settlers, most of them nowadays violent settlers, armed settlers, again, in Greenland, you never know, and military troops, and it's ugly. It's ugly, and for 57 years, it's really ugly. So I understand your concerns, you should be concerned, so choose your allies. And now the thing is that, Trump, as it was in 2017, has this capacity of making right and wrong very, very clear. He doesn't lie like his predecessor. He tells you straight in the face what he thinks and what he's going to do. And of course he's going to do that. Now, let's be honest. It's not going to kick out you need to continue the genocide. You really need to accelerate the genocide. You really need to intensify the genocide to kick the Palestinians out of Gaza. And you know, it's because if the Palestinians wanted, they would have left Gaza, 100%. Because remember that when Israel invaded Rafah, it has pushed nearly 2 million people south and westward. So people, when Israel invaded Rafah, were supposed to get into Sinai, go to the Rafah border and say, open the gates, let us in. Have you seen anyone doing that? And you know why? It's intentional. The Palestinians, after the Rafah invasion, have started to move north. And this is something that no one was expecting, surely not the Israelis. Because as many of them have told me, and trust me, it's painful. Many of them, of course, would have left. And many of them should be, those who want to leave should be allowed to leave. But there are also people who do not want to leave because they say this is the last bit of Palestine that I'm left with. And they don't want to move in a large refugee camp in North Sinai because this would be their fate. So they say, yeah, I stay put. And this is what indigenous people do. This is why I say, I know it's not possible unless the Trump plans to unleash an even more lethal military strategy to kill them all. Are we at this stage? And again, the question is, now, there are Israel and the US, it's very clear where do they stand. But what about the other 191 members of the international community? Why do we only look at the United States? What about the rest? Isn't this an opportunity, a fantastic opportunity to establish other relations with the Global South, for example? And it's very good because they don't look at us as superior anymore. Really, they laugh at us. They say, oh, what happens to human rights? That you have been lecturing us for decades about rule of law and human rights. What about freedom of expression and freedom of opinion, Europeans? So now we are all bad when it comes to human rights and we can start together, working together. But again, to prevent the worst. And I hope that this is also a lesson for an inspiration for Denmark.
Yes, and speaking about inspiration, a lot of people in this room have been very active for the last 15 months, protesting and making camps here in the university. But you can see clampdowns everywhere in Europe. We have in Amnesty International, we have a report out about right to protest, and everywhere in Europe, it's getting more and more difficult. They're imposing laws that make it difficult for people to demonstrate or people to say something against the conflict. So what are your views on this? What can we do more than we are already doing by going to the streets, by writing letters? What can we do?
So first of all, I don't think that people necessarily appreciate how much the continuous protest and the going to the street, taking the street and acts of disobedience and have made an impact. Because again, there is no way to prove what I'm saying, but we don't know what could have happened to Gaza had the pressure been even less than what it has been. It's true that political leadership has failed the Palestinians, but so much of Western societies has shown also the bright side of us, who we are. We need to pause for a moment and realize that the awareness that exists now around Palestine is also thanks to the global movement that has formed and of which we are all parts, as a speck of dust. But look at the light that all these specks of dust together are making, and so now this is to be capitalized with concrete actions. So the work has started and needs to be continued. So don't despair. We need to continue. It's going to be a long one and a painful one, but we have so much to lose if we give up. And it's not just for Palestine. As you can see, lawlessness knows no border and it's coming to us. So it's also something like self-preservation that should prompt us. So look, for example, at the action of Amnesty International, Oxfam, and ActionAid. It's immense. It's amazing. And actions like that need to continue. So something that is very urgent right now is to sensitize, to explain to the Danish public, which doesn't understand why there is nothing revolutionary in this case other than the fact that it's happening. Recognizing the possibility, there is the first hearing will be in 3 weeks, recognizing the legal standing of the plaintiffs, this organization and a Palestinian organization, Al-Haq, to stand against the government. It's fundamental. There are also precedents. It's not about being creative and making an exception for Israel. It's about making sure that there are no longer exceptions made for Israel. This is the point. And so I urge all of you to be part of this awareness raising. Get in touch with these 3 organizations, become really like the spokesperson somewhat of this. And the other thing is realize where is the danger, including on this society, what are the businesses. I mean, not only what BDS does is very, very important. And every ordinary individual should, get informed to know what is to be purchased or not, where to put the money, in order not to contribute to the legality of the occupation. But also try to think of if you're students, if you're journalists, if whatever path of life you come from, ask yourself what I can do in order to contribute to justice here and now.
Thank you so much for this first hour. We will take a break now until 8:30, and then we'll have a conversation here in the room. Thank you so much. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Good. Anyone wants to start?
Yeah. Right here.
Hello, my name is Sakina. I'm a student here at the University of Copenhagen. I'm also part of Students Against the Occupation, a pro-Palestinian group of students across Denmark. We're currently working for an academic boycott of academic institutions in Israel, and my question is, or as a university student, I'd like to ask what obligations university have in free democracies to uphold international law and maybe not collaborate with states committing genocide, guilty of apartheid, and illegal occupation. So what can and should universities do?
Do you want me to take another one?
Let's take more questions.
Okay,
so,
more, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Herren lige siden af.
Okay. Francesca, when you arrived, my name is Tony Stanhope. I've been working with human rights for more than 25 years, and I told you about that when you arrived. And if we had been open about human rights in Denmark, talking about it, improving them according to the law of the European Convention of Human Rights, then we would have been in a much better situation today, where we could actually confront the government and politicians and say, well, you have to live up to these standards. But no one ever bothered to really take it on the agenda.
Where's the question?
Do you want one more?
Yes, yeah, we can do
There's
3.
There's another one over here. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Rajesh. My question is regarding now Denmark has joined the UN Security Council. And I was wondering, you as a UN reporter, do you have any influence on Denmark meeting its international obligations? Because you also mentioned that during your presentation that we do not at any point meet our international obligations. So how are your reports being listening to by the UN? I mean, you are making a lot of reports, and what effect does they have? And can you have any influence on Denmark now they are a part of the UN Security Council? Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with the universities. There are many things that one could say, but I will focus on three which are very important. First of all, let's think of what universities are, places where people pursue a higher education, so should be places where the critical capacity of young citizens is formed, and so should first and foremost educate on facts, on truth, while I find that universities, especially in the West, have become, when it comes to Palestine, places of obscurantism, where it's really difficult to get it right. How it's possible that there is so much ignorance about a question that is 100 years long, and how it's possible that universities, like the rest of the educational system, prevents us, as Europeans, to really understand what 500 years of history, of our history as Europeans, which is 500 years of colonial history, have shaped our DNA. So I think that the first responsibility of universities is to decolonize, to have a honest approach to the discipline. And there is no discipline which is innocent, huh? Legal studies, architecture, medicines maybe, but again, we need to have that moment of introspections and concerns. Experience tells me that this regeneration is not starting from your deans, with all due respect for the deans, but I think it starts from you guys. And you have demonstrated it across the globe. I mean, I want you to realize that what students have done from US campuses to campuses and universities, I mean, other forms of dissent in Europe, has really saved our image to the eyes of the rest of the world. Because I live in Tunisia, and I've heard over and over comments like, they're really good, and so you see there is something good in the West. So this is, again, the regeneration starts from you, I would say. The second thing is protect freedom of speech, freedom of expression. How come that universities have become like, again, not just corners of obscurantism, but also places of repression? And especially, I talk to those who teach human rights. How it's possible? I mean, how can you teach human rights from the desk and then do not help students as they claim the defense, the protection of those human rights, not just for themselves, but for other human beings who are being slaughtered, turned into smithereens? So again, it's about coherence. And the third, probably most important for you all, because it's very pragmatic, it's to cut ties with any apartheid states. And again, I know the arguments, but the universities are not complicit. Well, read Maya Wind, this wonderful Israeli scholar who has exposed with unprecedented clarity how Israeli universities are fully embedded in the illegality of Israel's apartheid and regime imposed on the Palestinians, and the illegality of the occupation. So cutting ties with the universities, but also cutting ties with anything that has to do with the military industry. And I think that this is fundamental, and the legacy is going to be not only for Palestine, but for other countries as well. Had human rights been seriously on our agenda? Look, I mean, I would like us to be realistic, but also, I mean, realistic and in both sense, in the sense that the system we live in is not perfect, but I always remember, look at what we did in Europe 100 years ago to our fellow citizens. Look at slavery has lasted hundreds of years, 100 years, and it has only brought to an end thanks to people and some lawyers who stood against this. And this was the first civil society movement, the first human rights movement, the one for the abolition of slavery. Until 60 years, I was chatting with someone, and I said also yesterday, until 60 years ago, there were some European countries who, I mean, one European country in particular, who had people of African descent from one of the colonies in zoos. They were exposed like beasts. This is what I'm talking about. It's a process. And it can be progressive. So the last 80 years have set standards, and there has been the era of standard setting, and then mechanisms have formed at the national and international level to enforce human rights obligations. So there has been the development not just of treaties, but of laws, reception of those laws in our system. The enforcement is not perfect, and this is why we are in a new era, and it's the era, the challenge is accountability. This is why I insist on strategic litigation or offensive litigation, like the Hind Rajab Foundation calls it. But imagine how powerful would have been to have this an action like the one that Amnesty, Oxfam, and ActionAid have brought against the Danish state today, like 15 years ago. It would never be possible because, again, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, the image of Israel as the only democracy of the Middle East or as the startup nations was untouched. Today, Israel's reputation is not what it was, and it's gone forever. So this is why I need to say, yes, it's true that the world is not perfect, but because our systems are not perfect. There is an entire community which is raising up against this. So we have the opportunity to make the change, and we have to work for it. It's not going to, the world is not changing by inertia. It's changing if we make it change. And also the fact is that, going back to one of the points you were raising, member states have used international law, their international obligations, like a tray of cherries, really like a pick and choose menus. This yes, this no, to this state yes, to this state no. This is double standardism. And it's so ingrained in our system, but it has always been there. But when did we become really brutally aware of it? Is when, and now no one doubts of it anymore. And this is awareness that then leads, remember, truth and awareness are powerful tools, are power in and of itself. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, immediately member states discovered boycott, divest, and sanction. So it does work, the BDS movement, when it applies to the non-allies. So again, now we know all this, and this is what we need to use, this knowledge, to bring a change at the domestic level. The last question, what influence do I have as a special rapporteur? I would say depends on what I do. I am doing all what I can, frankly, because look, special rapporteurs have always been splendid. The point is that either they are noisy and pestiferous, or they are hardly known. So my predecessor were phenomenal lawyers, amazing, but they didn't have, they were not Southern Italians, but no, and they were not women. No, what I mean is that, so sometimes my humor works with the Danes as well. I was very frustrated that Danes don't laugh at my dark jokes. But the thing is that I've decided to engage with the media. And this is so important, so powerful, not only because it allows me to circumvent the cancel culture that is now part of our system. It's so rude when, as a UN person, because even if I'm not a UN official in the sense that I'm not paid by the UN, I'm not recruited by the UN, but it's something different. It's very important. The UN has given me a mandate to be a voice on a question as delicate, as sensitive, as intricate and complex as the occupied Palestinian territory. And I go to a country and the authorities don't meet with me. It's very rude. I mean, again, but again, bad manners always speak to the, to the person who uses it rather than the person who's on the receiving end. So how do I speak to the people? The media. And I try to also maximize these events, the encounter with people like you, who I mean, maybe you know already, you are familiar with my work, you are familiar with the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, but events like these are important because we need to get together. And first of all, these events are also, have been in other occasions a moment of collective grief. I mean, to get together and say, so I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. There are other hundreds and hundreds of people who feel like me, who thinks like me, who are horrified like me. And then to strategize together, to get inspired by each other. I mean, you keep on telling me, oh, you are such an inspirational, but you have such an inspiration, but you have no idea how much inspiration I get by meeting you and listening to what you said or what civil society here says. I mean, I've had really the meetings I had with Danish organizations and journalists over the past 2 days, and some politicians. They are not all bad. So they have been really eye-opening and strategic. So now you need to build on it, on my brief visit, and then we will see how influential it was, and I will carry this on with me, and these partnerships will lead to something else. It's like building a net, and Copenhagen has been a knot. Voila.
Hi, Francesca. My name is Bettina. I attended an event, European Palestinian Network, some weeks back, and there was a lawyer that said something that really resonated in me, and that was defend the defenders. And we quite often hear, like in the US, with students that actually can't fulfill finish their academics, or other people that go into demonstrations and get, imprisoned and whatnot. But how is it that we can help these people, not only collective as a people that we can write something on social media, but these people there's quite often, it can be financial consequences, they can lose their jobs, they can, there's a lot of consequences going on there. What advice would you give us others to be able to defend the defenders?
I have one here, and then there's another one over here.
Hi, my name is Buthaina, and I'm a Palestinian scholar. I have one question related to self-determination, because you spoke a lot about self-determination, and I know it's very much anchored within the international law, within the anti-colonial movements and stuff like that. I would like to ask you, how do you relate and correlate self-determination as a principle with the right for armed resistance, especially if you look in. I have 2 points which I will make very, very briefly. Within this context, then you can actually contextualize the armed resistance within your framework of settler colonialism and indigeneity, which you talked about. And probably maybe we can draw on, the liberation of Algeria more than the apartheid system collapse in South Africa. How do you correlate these 2 things together? And how do you explain why do not we speak so much about these things, especially in a Western context? Thank you. And don't take pictures of me when I say these things.
My name is Uzma, and thank you so much for letting us breathe with your words and your informations and your positivity, although the situation is like it is. What I'm asking for is somehow to save me from feeling egoistic, because I work with allyship,
And what I see, I work with allyship in companies and corporations. And what I see is that there's a polarization going on, which is not being recognized. So we have this Nordic exemption of not accepting that we live in a society where racism and discrimination exists. And I think that I really need some kind of blessing, that we also need to work on our internal matters here in Denmark, and how is that linked with the fear of the future, and how is it linked with the exposure of the Western Orientalism, as you say, and how do we prepare for it, and how do we improve it?
Okay. Er der nogen heroppe, eller? Ja.
Er det okay? Thank you very much. Oh. First of all, Francesca Albanese, thank you very much for being a lighthouse of moral clarity and a conscience for so many of us. And I'm, for one, deeply inspired by your work and the way you stand up for human principles. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. My name is Mikkel. I'm a sociologist of religion, also a foreign policy analyst specializing in US Middle East foreign policy. My question to you is, many people, including Professor John Mearsheimer, has for many years propagated that the reasons behind the United States policy in the Middle East is the Israeli lobby. I would concur with other people coming out these days, like Colonel Wilkerson, who is a former chief of staff of Colin Powell, who says that the project of genocide and colonialism of Palestine is not an Israeli lobby project. It's an American project, and it's a direct continuation of the European legacy of colonialism and racism. What do you think about that? And have you had any experience in the United Nations system that either supports or criticizes that? Thank you.
So thank you very much for the questions, which are really, really important and thought-provoking. Defend the defenders, it's something on which I really insist. And it's something that all of you have a responsibility to uphold. And I'm not saying all of you, it's all of you and those like you. And then I will explain. This is why I asked my colleague to look for something on the internet, because I would like you to understand the virtue of patience toward ignorant people. We need to have no judgment, really, because I know, trust me, it takes a lot. Work on your karma. But it's, we need to, before getting there are so many people who are attacked and are silenced. And the only way to counter it and to stop it is to become stronger, to grow stronger. And how do we do that? But really physically. Imagine, creating a bigger, a larger basis. How do you do? They tackle you. You should have other people speaking out and even gathering resources. People have lost their job. Take them to court. Take them to court, because when you take them to court, they lose. And I don't know if you know of this organization, which is phenomenal, the European Legal ELC, the European Legal Support Center. It's a relatively young organization, but it has, in a few years, it has changed life for many, because they take to court people who act discriminatorily, no question about that. And since the beginning of my mandate, I've been interacting with them, and we said we need to call this thing with its own name. It's anti-Palestinian racism, and it's discriminating against the Palestinians as Palestinians, and everyone who stands in solidarity with the Palestinians because of Palestine. This is racism. And it has something to do also with anti-Islam, very strong in this part of the world, Jesus, but also anti-Arabism in general. We are so charged with prejudice, and it's really vile. We need to admit it. This is who we are. There is this Israeli scholars, is, by the way, the first who, in the immediate aftermath of October 7, said this is a textbook case of genocide. And I was saying, yeah, he was totally right. And you know why? Because settler colonialism is genocidal. We will get there in a minute. But however, and so what has made the difference is having organizations like intervening to defend those who were criminalized, punished, vilified because of their activism. This is another thing that I'm realizing in this country. Activism is like the dirty word. Oh, you are an activist. Yeah. Well, you know what? Thank God for the activists, because they are the antibodies of a healthy society. And thank God there are activists. And being active meaning act when something goes wrong. So don't leave it as a badge of honor. I mean, we need to fight also this the negative acception of this term. But so crowdfunding, find lawyers and ready to take action in courts. So this is why I say our mind needs to shift. Organizations, and again, I know it's the third time I name them, but because this is for me, these are role models in this society. But Amnesty, ActionAid, and Oxfam are the only three organizations who have responded to my appeal. And I can tell you, I can't tell you how many meetings I've had with organizations working in Palestine since the beginning of my mandate saying, please denounce the apartheid. Please denounce the illegality of the occupation. Don't normalize this. Palestinians do not need your charity, do not need you to write reports over reports over reports over reports. We need action. And take action against in courts. And these are the only three organizations who have done it. And this is the first country where Amnesty has also done it in Amnesty and Oxfam, also in the UK. But you see the difference. And so I would like you to reflect on the fact that solidarity, it's not a passive term. Solidarity requires action. In fact, the solidarity is, someone said, it's the political declination of love. And it's true. And this is what makes us the human family we are, right? Also think of, I don't know if you, in Denmark, you are obsessed with Latin as Italian, but it's very telling that the root of the term solidarity in Latin is solidum. That means one piece, together. This is what it means being human, standing in solidarity to one another, being part of this togetherness. So when they touch you, you resent it and you act for it. You know what I mean? So I think you got the point. I tend to rant. So there should be, always remember, seeking advice and building solid networks. Self-determination and armed resistance. I'm so glad you asked this question because I've said it all along, but since the beginning, and you have no idea of the hatred I've attracted for saying that. But of course, the Palestinians have the right to resist. In fact, what international law says, and it's incredible that, I know that there are certain people in this country who say, oh, you're justifying violence. No, it's international law that recognizes violence. Because unfortunately, I wish violence was avoidable. I would love to live in a violence-free world. So let's go to the basic and international law. international law recognizes the right to resist of people under occupation, no, under oppression and apartheid, sorry, repressive regimes and apartheid. So all the people in the world have it. This is something that has been codified at the time of the decolonization. So you see, human rights are the product of the blood and suffering and fight and struggles of human beings. So I'm saying, let's not throw away the baby with the dirty water, I would say in Italy. I mean, I know that the system has not served all of us, but it's better to have it rather than not. And we will miss it very much when we don't have it anymore. Because as the Secretary General of Amnesty was saying yesterday, and I think it's very true, the UN has been the platform to advance human rights. And now we need to protect, to preserve it. However, so armed resistance has been recognized, but more than that, the General Assembly has also recognized the right of the Palestinian to resist with all necessary means. Wait a second, but within the limits of the law, international law, which means, and there was a gentleman who came to talk to me before, I hope he didn't misunderstand me, but within the limits of the law is necessary to preserve the sanctity of life of every civilian. I know how many Palestinians feel that all Israelis are responsible for the taking of the land. To an extent, the moral responsibility is there. But first of all, there are Israelis who are, like Jonathan, who are fighting against the system, who are fighting against genocide, against apartheid, and against occupation. And these are our allies. We cannot confuse them or obliterate them or think that they are responsible because they are Israelis. Because if we fall in that trap, we are as racist as those who think that the Palestinians are all responsible for October 7. And I know very well the argument that, yes, but the Israelis have taken Palestine from the Palestinians. Yes, but we are in the third generation. So the role of the responsibility of the Israelis now, they cannot cancel themselves. I mean, they are there and they are part of this settler colonialism. And the point is that they need to work to correct the current injustices and injustices of the past. But going back to the right of resist, the right to resist is for the people, what the right to self-defense is for the state. So when the state is attacked, it has the right to defend itself. So what is it? The right to use force. And that is only possible for a state under two circumstances. When a state is attacked by another state, and when the use of force is authorized by the Security Council. And none of these circumstances occurred on October 7, by the way. And this is why I've said from the very beginning, Israel cannot invoke the right of self-defense against the Palestinians because it occupies their land. So it needs, after repelling the attack on October 7, it had to find other means, A, to liberate the hostages, B, to bring justice, but not to carpet bomb Gaza. And so the Palestinians, in return, they have people who have their right of self-determination violated, have the right to resist. And the Palestinian resistance is so rich. There is peaceful resistance, which is our resistance through legal avenues, resort to international justice. This is also a form of resistance, of responsibility. But of course, you asked me about armed resistance. And armed resistance is legitimate under international law. It can never target civilians. Now the point is, and there is no definitive question. I'm going to look into this because we need to solve that Gordian knot. But settlers are civilians, yes. The point is that under international law, civilians lose civilian status when they become part of the conflict. So the question is, and we need to have this discussion at the international level, violent settlers are a legitimate target of the resistance or not? And this is something, but we are already at a level of sophistication that no one has gone to because of the fear So we need to normalize the discussion. Yes, Palestinians have the right to resist, like the Black South African had the right to resist the apartheid. And when I was asked yesterday, yeah, but Hamas, we consider it as a terrorist organization. I'm not here to defend Hamas, and I will not do, but I just would like to bring attention to the fact that the ANC, the African National Council of South Africa, was considered a terrorist organization. You know that Nelson Mandela was considered a terrorist. So let's learn from history. The reason why there is no one treaty on defining what terrorism is that states freak out. Because if they put black on white what terrorism is, I mean, there would be many responsibilities, and it would not be only on the resistance movements. Let's put it this way. So for me, I'm not dismissing that what is terrorism, and terrorism exists, but instead I look at who commits terrorism based on the objectivity of the crimes, of what has been done. It's easy to say, I do not engage with you because you are a terrorist. And so your labeling impacts the fate of an entire people, because in this country, people make a lot of confusion. The Palestinians are Hamas. So there is a lot of education that is to be done, and a lot of normalization of this. The Palestinians have the right to resist in their land where Israel has no right to be militarily and through its civilian population. The way of Israel to protect its citizens in the occupied Palestinian territory is to bring them home to the land that was taken from the Palestinians in 1948, which is already quite a gift, no? So, yeah, this is what I wanted to say. I don't think that you refer to the indigeneity framework as my framework. This is something that the Palestinians have used since ever. And again, I learned not even that long ago what settler colonialism is. And as I've learned, everyone should learn. But it's something that indigenous people have said it all along. And look, I'm learning so much. When I was in Australia or in Canada, I realized that it's wrong to say that settler colonialism is an instance of the past, because these indigenous groups continue to be discriminated, their land continue to be taken, and they continue to be, say, well, we told them that they can participate in this process. Yeah, but this is not their rules. This is not the way self-determination is deciding for themselves. So, and indigenous people are still struggling for true recognition. It's not about saying, oh, we are on the land of the Inuit or the First Nations, and then let's continue to steal their land. So this is why now it's also time to unite the different struggles, those of indigenous people, those who are fighting for environmental justice, and so on and so forth. We need to unite all the struggles for justice and human rights. And of course, we need to talk more about that in the West. But so this is your job and mine. Racism, again, it's a lot of work, huh? But I asked Teresa, did you pull? You need to see this. You need to see this, because when I now I'm not teaching anymore. But did you find it? Yes. Can you pull it up?
In a few seconds.
Okay. So, however, it takes a lot of effort because people don't see their racism. And there is nothing wrong in being discriminatory, in offending others, in insulting others. But this is the work. I mean, you're lucky because you also have a national human rights institutions like the Danish Human Rights Institutions, which is quite good and effective and vocal. There should be a study. I think that there should be a study now on anti-Palestinian racism. Let me go back. What do you see? What do you see? Bricks, stones. I mean, this is really how I start talking about Palestine. Anything else? Separation, but you see the bricks, yeah? No one see the cigar. You see the cigar. Now look at the cigar. So you see that little pebble in between the bricks? This is the ash, and the brown thing is the cigar. You see? There are still people who do not see the cigar. And this is the thing. Now keep on looking. Is there anyone unable to see the cigar? This is the thing. This is Palestine. The moment you see what it is, you cannot unsee it anymore. But it's hard. You really need to take people by hand. And this is why I was saying we need to be patient. Because by being aggressive, you resolve nothing. And I'm telling you, and sometimes I lose my patience too. Like yesterday with one of your politicians. It really brought the worst out of me. And I'm not sorry. But you see, you really need to, first of all, understand how to communicate, bring examples from history. And this is why I insist that we need to talk about our past. You know, when I was in the US, I often talk about the Holocaust. And not because it has something to do with the idiotic accusations that they move against me. But for two reasons, many, but for two reasons in particular. A, this is our history. This is not only Jewish history. Like the Nakba is not just the history of the Palestinians. This is our history, who we are as human beings, what we have done to each other. And all the more, my people have led 50,000, probably more, of our connationals or our fellow nationals to die because they were Jewish. And we don't even know how many of them died in the ghettos, in the concentration camps that we had created before the concentration camps, where people were led to die by starvations and lack of medicines. So there have been other ghettos, there have been other forms of concentration of the Jews before that. And this is our history. And it happened, happened in Europe because the Jews were the other, the Semitic. And it was not even the first genocide of human history, as I said. We have done it before. I mean, Germany had just committed another genocide of the Herero and the Nama people in Namibia. Look also at the double standards there. They recognize the moral responsibility, but no financial compensation, no reparation. So you see the double standards. And again, doesn't matter. So today we need to bring back that story because we are not that different. And Ras Sigal explained it very well. He says, the idea of the pure race, of the superior race, white, Christian, was not an idea, an invention of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler is a monster who rose one day, who had mental issues, who rose one day to power, supported by others, and then made of that an ideology which led to the death of millions of people. And this is the past that will return if we are not aware of what we can be. And remember, monsters are a few. Monsters are few. This is Primo Levi who used to say that. It's the indifferent, it's the others, the civil servants who keep on pushing papers, who do just a little bit, but it's like the F-35 thing. I contribute, Denmark says, I contribute just to a little part. It's just the components that drops the bombs. I don't build the rest. Well, you are that part, this is how you contribute to the genocide of the Palestinians. And however, so education, and so the writing reports shouldn't be about the violations of human rights around the world, also start talking about what happens in Denmark. And this is something that cannot be left to the I don't know how to call the originally white native Danes. But there are so many people who come from other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and are part of this society. And the weight of fighting racism cannot be left only on them. It is to be of all of you, all of us, especially let's say, those that do not have ancestries in other parts of the world. Voila. The last question is the Israeli lobby. Well, first of all, let me tell you, the pro-Israel lobby today is made of so many Christians. I had no idea. But around the world, this is a new phenomenon in the global South, and something we need to understand. In the global South, the solidarity with Palestine has eroded because throughout churches, the cult for Israel has grown, has widened. It's unbelievable. But I mean, from India to the islands of the Pacific to Latin America, you have this. You have support for Israel because the priests say that when Israel will lead to the advent of, I don't know, I'm not very strong in religious matters. I have an allergy to it. But again, it's whatever it is. Excuse me. I mean, is it serious? Again, are we still there? Yes, we are still there. So always work with churches. Churches have a huge responsibility to take this nonsense back and to bring it under check. And then, I do understand your question. I'm not sure I'm the most articulate person in answering, unpacking it, the American project. Look, an historian last year told me, do you know that the United States, both all the oldest documents of the Greek Athens and Spartans wars, and the way they've studied how old Athens expanded to become an empire. They've studied the first form of colonialism in history, which was probably that of the Greek. And so Edward Said also talks about imperialism and settler colonialism being a function of imperialism, somewhat. So I get all these at the level of intuition. I'm not sure, again, because this is out of my realm of competence, but I do see that there is a critical tie between the United States and Israel. The United States, a country which is birthed from a genocide, from many genocides, in fact. It's unfair to say one genocide because there were hundreds of Native American populations across the continent and across the Americas, and they were all genocided, which means a few have survived and now live in total despair and segregation. But many of them have also become scholars and are explaining all this and allow us to understand the deep roots of the imperial projects, which is, again, I don't know if it's a settler colonialism is a function, but they are intertwined and they allow Western supremacy to continue to flourish, root and expand. Richard Falk, my predecessor's predecessor in the mandate, used to talk together with other scholars about global apartheid. And when I read it, say, no, it makes no sense because apartheid can only be practiced within a state. This is how conservative lawyers are. Me too. And then I really get it. And Gaza proves that there is a global apartheid. Look at the way the West reacts, like one mind, one arm, many arms, in fact, and one wallet that goes into weapons. And so we need to understand that we are part of this system. We finance this system through our taxes somewhat and whatever we do. So we need to be watchful, aware that we need to, I mean, for me, Gaza, do you remember the movie Matrix? Yeah, those of you who have not watched it, please do, because it's very important. It's really, Gaza has been the red pill, blue pill, for me it's been the red pill, and it's okay. It's very painful to understand this, I mean, what I was showing you, to understand how brutal the reality is, but only by understanding it we can make it better. Voilà.
Only two.
5 minutes more, so.
No, we can take 3 more questions, right?
Yeah, we'll take 1 or 2. Yeah. You only have 10 minutes left.
Why?
What? Why?
They kick us out.
Because we'll be.
I just want to understand the rules.
Jonathan says 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes. That's it.
You are the only people in the world
Because
who get anxious if you do not arrive in advance, ahead of time to a meeting.
Yeah, I know.
Guys, relax, chill.
Hello, my name is Mohammed. I'm from Egypt, so a country of the global south. Egypt, yes. First of all, thank you very much for first the choice of being vocal, to choose to be vocal and engaging with the media. I think that's very important. So in Egypt, we have a saying about Gaza. We say in the Arab world, the only free land is Gaza, and the rest of the Arab world is still occupied, if that makes any sense. So coming from that background, I want to ask you, is it actually possible to apply international law and accountability on a Western states? You just mentioned that the cherry picking for applying international law. So is it actually possible? I know the importance of all these efforts to expose the double standard, but is it actually possible to apply international law in Western government? Because if yes, what is the difference that's making it now from any other wars like Iraq war, Afghanistan, Cambodia, and yeah, and what's going on even now, like when we see what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Congo, what's happening in Libya, all conflicts that we see at the moment, it's basically rooted back to Western influence, easier to exploit natural resources from those regions or whatsoever. So is it actually possible? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Reem. I'm half Palestinian, half Egyptian from Denmark, and I'm a global humanities student. First of all, I would like to thank you for being here and for amplifying the voices of Palestinians. I have a question that may be a bit like hard or repetitive, but I feel like most of us have already thought about it here. I feel like we always look at our roles, like individual roles, as like a societal or national or a global role, and we always think about like how do we change the government, how to change international laws. But I feel like we are missing a point where like, or we don't know how to do, like how to reach our friends or like our close, like the social context, the people who we see every day, like at, I don't know, like different activities or school or whatever. So I just want to ask, like, do you have any advice on how to like decolonize the minds of the people that we are like really close to? We don't want to lose. We know we can change them, but they like after, I don't know, 76 years and now 15 months, consecutive months of exposure to information on social media and everything, and they still choose not to speak up or choose to remain silent. Like, do you have any advice on what to do as like on the social individual context, if that makes sense? Thank you.
Good question. That's it. That's it. Only 2 questions, Francesca. I know I'm Chilean, but I'm domesticated Danish. So yeah, they tell me we finish at 9:30, and I'm already stressing about that. So these 2 questions, and we have to go.
It's true what I said. Huh? I mean, look at the clock. Oh my God. I started thinking, getting preoccupied when it's 9:45. We had to finish at 9:30. Okay, I'll be quick. So think of how bad is the situation for the Egyptians if they look at Gaza as the land of freedom. However, no, I mean, that was one of my the sense of humor of the Italian who's not understood by the Danish. It's okay. Allora, is it accountability in the West possible? It's necessary. What I know, I don't know if it's necessary. We need to make possible. Many things look impossible until we make them possible. So it's not going to come from God. It's not going to. We need to make it happen. And this is why, again, I'm hammering on this. But we will know if it's possible based on what happens in the Danish court in 3 weeks. And if it doesn't succeed, more needs to happen. I mean, yes, today I was discussing with someone, and he was saying eventually the judges are also judges are also people who read the newspapers, and probably look at TikTok. I don't know. But they will know what's happening outside. And this is why it's important to continue this awareness raising. We need to be that. Yesterday I was saying, we don't make the revolution, we are the revolution. We are in that moment where the social movement can change politics. And I totally get it. Don't think that I know that you listen to me and say, oh, you are so optimistic. I'm not optimistic, I'm furious, I'm enraged because this genocide shouldn't have happened, and it's a tragedy foretold, but it's this fury that becomes fire and keep me going. And this is what you have to do. I mean, excuse me, but if you, and I'm not pointing, of course, to you, this is something I generally tell people and say, I'm so disheartened by this whole situation that I lose faith, so what can I do? Well, it means that you see you are misusing your privilege, because the fact that you have a choice not to do anything shows that you prefer to be a spoiled brat who cries instead of acting. And today you have to decide whether you want to be a spoiled brat who cries and say, oh, the poor people in Gaza, we have nothing we can do. Do you understand what is BDS in Copenhagen? Or can you ask advice? Can you volunteer with one of these organizations? Can you support the students when they get mistreated? I'm just saying, are you ready to sacrifice a little bit of your comfort so that another people doesn't have to lose everything? This is the question that you need to ask yourselves. And then you have the strength to go and hold your government accountable. We cannot make other change, but we must change ourselves. This is how we also change things in the society. And then, we're in time, we still have 2 minutes. I get you. I mean, I don't think I've ever said that, but one of my best friends in life, I'm not talking to this person, we have fought. I simply realized that I cannot engage with people who do not want to listen. You will not change everyone 100% in the society. Sometimes you need to live with it, and you decide whether you can tolerate having racist people in your life, or you can live without. But now it's the time to look for allies. And this is why I was talking with 2 Palestinians here in the little crowd during the break. And I was saying, this is the time, guys, we are at war. And at war, we make fronts to resist. And you don't check the credentials, like in war, you don't check the credentials of the soldiers next to you, whether they support your political party or your football team. You fight together until you have won. This is where we are today. I understand that, and this is something I also tell the Palestinians, and I hope I don't sound like preaching. No, but this is really an advice that I have as someone who's fighting for justice next to you. And as part of it, I say, this is not the time to exclude from this resistance process those who do not agree with you 100%. Choose the priorities. Do people stand against genocide, occupation, and apartheid? Yes, they are your allies. Maybe they don't talk about Palestine the way you want, but do they stand against these 3 things, and are they ready to do something? These are the people you have to work with. Thank you, guys.
Du har det her for mig. Kan jeg slukke?
Nej, bare sådan tidligere med, hvis man skal lige... Ja, men fordi jeg skal gå over...
Tusind tak alle sammen for alle spørgsmålene. Tusind tak. Thank you so much, Francesca.
Thank you.
Now I give the word to the boss. He's the one with the clock. Jonathan, please.
Sure.
I was asked by Bettina to do the thing with the gifts. I also do videos and drive. So we have a few gifts for you. The luggage? Oh. We might have budget for overweight or something. Okay, so Francesca, thank you so much. It has been such a delight for all of us and for me personally too. Please.
Thank you.
And Francesca's trusted assistants. We have Teresa Rosella. Thank you. And Amal Lubani, who is, yes. And last but not least, Paula Larrain for the magnificent moderating. Susan Tuck. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was great.